Dear friends, Patrick Peace here. This is the last, hopefully the last video. I finished the book Compromised by Peter Strzok, Counterintelligence and the Threat of Donald J. Trump. This book should be called, a better title would be Compromised, a Case Study in Trump Derangement Syndrome by Peter Strzok. So in the last video, we covered up until chapter 12, I believe. So we're going to go through the final chapters 12 to 16 and the epilogue. As I said, it's probably pretty tedious to go through, and hopefully I can get through it with one video. I guess Comey just got fired, and then the author here is feeling very unsettled, and he talks about on page 231, the puzzling, unexplained loyalties to Putin, the Trump's administration's actions vis-a-vis Russia were highly suspicious. He doesn't say what actions. He doesn't say what loyalties. And he says the president may have obstructed justice by firing Comey. And he said he attempted to effect a change at the FBI would help Russia. He pulls stuff out of thin air, this guy. I'm going to skip some of the notes that I took because they're repetitive and tedious. He goes on and on about complaining when Trump fired Comey, the head of the FBI there. And he's all upset about that. And he says, oh, this is going to cause this is going to cause that, it's going to increase, cooperation with Russia. He says he was disgusted. He says his blood ran cold, And he goes on and on about all these memos, but he never produces any memos. On page 235, he says, oh, this likely gives the Russians yet another point of leverage over him, which is really the opposite. This is the question that I have here. I'm just going to throw this out in the middle of my analysis of this book and just trying to wade through all the gossip and bullshit. If you have a country that has access to nuclear weapons, and you got another country that has access to nuclear weapons, and they're on opposite sides of the earth, basically, aka Russia and the United States, wouldn't you want those two people to be on good terms? Wouldn't you want those people to be in contact? Hopefully on some type of cordial, if not friendly, at least professional basis. And this guy, just, any little detail that comes up, oh, this guy's connected to the Trump administration, so that's giving Russia access to the president. It just gets a little bit, tedious after a while. In chapter 8, he sensed, right? On page 243, I sensed, as many of us did, whether they should open an investigation on Trump or not. And he finishes the chapter by saying, the question was how we would be able to protect the U.S. and Trump himself from the consequences if the Russians found them, if the Russians found these memos about Comey and blah, blah, blah. That's that's chapter 12, not chapter 8. That's chapter 12. Chapter 13, he's continuing on about the Russians. His first task on page 246, investigate the president himself, whether to determine the nature of his relationship with the Russian government. The second was whether a special counsel should do it. This is the first question he wanted to address, right? Two critical questions that had been building up for months, he says, whether to investigate the president himself and to determine the nature of his relationship with the Russian government. He's got Russia on the brain. He's got a severe case of TDS. He says on page 248, he basically tips his hand at this point. He says, from the moment I opened Crossfire, this was the name they gave to their investigation of Russia, was called Crossfire Hurricane. From the moment I opened Crossfire, I knew there was the possibility that we would reach the point at which we might be investigating Trump. In other words, he's saying this is what he wanted to do from the get-go. To paraphrase, he says, I knew there was the possibility that we'd reach the point at which we might be investigating Trump. That's what he wanted. How did you know that was going to be a possibility? Because that's what you wanted from the get-go. He says further down, oh, I hadn't wanted to investigate the President of the United States, but my conviction on that point had been eroded by Trump's continued suspicious behavior with the Russians and his ongoing attacks on our investigation. For me, as for McCabe, many of the FBI remaining senior leaders, Comey's firing was a tipping point. That's it. Oh, he fired Comey. That's it. That's suspicious behavior with the Russians, right? In some ways, reaching the decision to investigate Trump came as a relief. Page 249. So he's talking out of two sides of his mouth. He says this is his motivation. Oh, I don't want to investigate Trump. But as soon as they say they're going to investigate him, he says, oh, thank God. You know, that's what he says. No one had hoped or wished for this. You liar. You just said it's what you were expecting. In no uncertain terms, you basically said that's what you were hoping. And still no direct evidence on Trump. His potentially obstructive act, right? He had zero evidence. He says on the bottom of page 250, our job was to investigate whether Trump was or had been wittingly or unwittingly involved in activities for or on behalf of the government of Russia that might constitute violation of law or threats to national security. And there was none. There was no evidence. Asking those questions made my heart hurt as well as my head. Oh, fuck off. Like, this guy lays it on thick. We decided we needed to widen the case to include obstruction. It's just lame. He introduces Sessions, Jeff Sessions here. I'm going to skip over some of these notes because it'll take me too long. I made a lot of notes on this, just inconsequential information. He says that on page 260, the various Russian activities we had documented made up a dizzyingly complicated portrait of foreign interference. And I was momentarily overwhelmed by the task of putting it into a succinct and coherent storyline for the special counsel. He had nothing. On top of it all, at the pinnacle of this heap of perfidy and treachery, sat a president who had lied to the public, cozied up to Russia, and once he became aware of them, attempted to block our investigation at every turn. Like, this guy is exaggeration, hyperbole. And I took a bunch of notes on the next page as well. So here, look what he says here on page 261. How am I doing for time? I might have to do 2 videos, but let me try and finish this off if I can. He says here, I also believed that Trump was compromised badly and in myriad of ways. He had a host of questionable business dealings and thus far had reduced to release his financial records. This is one of the first comments he made at the beginning of the book. He didn't release his financial records. Oh, how horrible. He had innumerable alleged extramarital affairs, and his personal attorney claimed to have hush money to some of the women to silence them. He goes on about his Trump Foundation charity that funneled millions of dollars to his campaign, which Trump was later ordered by a court to repay to other charities. He pulls up all these things, and then he goes on to say, but his most egregious vulnerability stemmed from his lies about his Russian dealings. He's got nothing on his Russian dealings. He even goes back again to say, well, at one time someone from his from his inner circle mentioned that they might build a Trump Tower there. That's all he has in the whole fucking book, is Trump Tower in Moscow. Why not build a Trump Tower in Moscow? If he's the president and he's talking to Putin and he says, hey, Putin, I should build a freaking Trump Tower in Moscow. I know how to build luxury buildings. That makes him compromised by saying something like that? Which he doesn't even have proof that he said that. He just repeats that over and over again. He said he was going to build a Trump Tower in Moscow. That makes him compromised. That's his conclusion in the whole fucking book. That because Trump or somebody close to Trump once said, you know, that's what he was going to do. And so, you know, there it is again on page 277. Whether or not Trump knew the real reason for the Trump Tower meeting at the time. So apparently Donald Trump Jr. had a meeting with somebody that was connected to Russia talking about Trump Tower. And Donald Trump Jr. said, oh, we were talking about adopting kids and, you know, trying to take care of children or something like that. But they said, oh, no, actually it came up in this meeting that they were talking about Trump Tower. Whether or not Trump knew the real reason for the Trump Tower meeting at the time, he certainly seemed to know about it after the fact. And he seemed to have done, he certainly seemed to know about it after the fact, and he seemed to have done his best to cover it up. Again, I had the irrepressible thought, these were not the actions of an innocent man. What a loser comment that is. I got to agree with Trump on that. You call him a loser. He sounds like a loser when he talks like that. And so, you know, now the shoe drops here, okay, on page 282. So this was the whole conclusion that he had about, you know, his whole big evidence that he gave to Mueller when Mueller got appointed to take over from Comey. He had to come up with his whole summary of what he had on the president, right? He had to come up with all his details, and this is what he was able to come up with. These details that I mentioned. Oh, you know, he had affairs, and you know, he said that he might build a Trump Tower there. This is what he was able to come up with when he had to do an interview with Mueller. He didn't have anything. He had shit. And anyway, so yeah, the shoe drops on page 282 when he gets a call and says, we need to interview you. He gets contacted by this investigative governance I guess it's like an overseeing of the FBI, where they say, we need to interview you to determine whether some of your text messages indicate improper political bias. And he says, well, that's easy. I thought, of course they don't. No, they did, you dink. And sure, I said, with little appreciation of the ferocious storm that was about to break. And he goes here, I thought back to the text I had sent during the mid-year investigation. That was the investigation on Clinton. He says, I didn't remember many of them. Oh, isn't that interesting? Selective memory. You know, it's just this lack of self-awareness that he displays. You know, I don't know if it's based on, I wonder if it's based on some type of envy that he says, oh, Trump had all these extramarital affairs. Well, he had an extramarital affair. But is he envious that he only had one and Trump had dozens? Like, you know, isn't it hypocrisy to say, oh, he had all these affairs? But meanwhile, this guy's had his own affair that he doesn't ever mention in the book, but it's public on public record, right? He says he had a pit in his stomach that some of his text messages might be ripe for misinterpretation. Ooh. Oh, what did he say? Make no mistake, I regret sending those texts. But there's a point that's worth noting. Bureau policy allowed personal use of FBI smartphones, and most everyone I knew in the everybody was doing it, right? Most everyone I knew in the bureau used their work phones or to text or email friends and family, or even people like their doctor, clergy member, or attorney. So did I. He doesn't have any clergy members, trust me. Oh man, some of the notes that I took here are just funny. He says, I was naive, he says on page 285. Yeah, you were naive and self-deluded, man. So let's continue on. How am I doing for time? He mentions they're trying to, he says, so proud that he was trying to increase diversity. He got basically taken off his position and stuck in human resources. That's a great spot for him. So he went in there to work on diversity. And so we continue on about blah, 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 details. And he says here, people can hold personal political opinions and separate those opinions from their work. Well, obviously he wasn't able to, was he? As an FBI employee, I was prohibited from commenting to the media, even on nonsense. And I wonder why they didn't even, if he's in such a position working for the FBI and the U.S. government, doesn't he have a non-disclosure agreement that would extend after he retires or is fired for whatever reason? I'm surprised they let this book even get published, honestly. Like, it's he lists a summary of Trump's description of him on page 303 of all the names that he called him. And I don't know, man. Trump is bombastic, obviously, but he's bombastic for a reason, I guess. I'm not going to repeat all the nasty stuff that Trump said about him. Even at page 307, he still doesn't get it. He still talks about how the way he describes Trump. He's still got severe TDS. So let's go on to chapter 16. This is the last chapter of the book, I believe. If there was anything that jumped out at me here. Finally, in the last chapter of the book, the only big revelation he gives is about himself. He finally gives a big revelation of something that was written. And he says, he had expressed his view that Trump would never be elected. He says, in a text that to this day I still do not remember writing. Late at night I wrote, or he qualifies, it was late at night, so he must have been sleepy and groggy and tired, right? He doesn't remember writing it. Maybe he was drunk, I don't know. He says, we will stop it, he said, about, Trump getting elected. He said, we will stop it. It was an artless comment, but conveyed by firm belief that Trump, a TV personality who is proving to be a crass, racist, misogynistic force in our national politics, and who is espousing views that radically undermine our national security commitments to NATO and the world, would not be chosen by the American people to become president. This is TDS on full display, right? His Trump derangement syndrome causes him either to have memory loss or some type of brain misfunction. He says, we're going to stop Trump from getting elected. We will stop it, in quotes, is the exact phrase that he uses. We will stop it. Because, why? Because he has a firm belief that Trump, a TV personality, oh, isn't that terrible? He was a TV personality who was proving to be crass. He thinks he's crass, right? Or he calls him a racist. Does he ever give anything in the book to support that Trump was racist? No. Misogynistic force. Oh, because he had many relations with women, just like the author did? And, he's just a severe case of Trump derangement syndrome. That's all it is. He's got no evidence. He's got no proof. He assumes, he thinks, he doesn't like Trump. obviously, and that clouded his view of how he communicated in his messages. And he still keeps going on. They had a staggering amount of coercive leverage over the American president. Do you really think that somebody is able to have coercive leverage over the American president based on what this guy investigated? When he gets fired and gets kicked out, this is something interesting that I'll just tack on to the end here. I'm already going over my time. But as he's cleaning out his stuff from his office, a little footnote here jumped out at me. He says he placed a small rosewood-colored Buddha from Taiwan in a book. This is little totem that he had there. This little good luck charm. He had a Buddha, and a red and white keffiyeh with a tasseled black eagle from a trip to the Middle East. And he's putting this stuff away. Does that tell you anything about the character of this individual? I'm not going to comment on it. I'll let you make your own conclusion about that. And then you have the epilogue. You know, he gets booted out. He gets fired. And then he even continues again on page 343 in the epilogue. Just as Trump's unacknowledged Trump Tower Moscow negotiations gave the Russians leverage over him, his secret and apparent threat to withhold aid to Ukraine in exchange for personal benefit gave some leverage over Ukraine. You know, he tries to compare two things that is a bad analogy. But anyway, he mentions it in just in passing, right? How could, even if he did have Trump Tower Moscow negotiations, how would that give the Russians leverage over him? That's what the guy does. He's a real estate businessman. He likes building luxury properties all over the world. It's absolutely ridiculous, baseless, exaggerated. He says here on page 346, they found the truth, he says, in this investigation that they did. My personal beliefs never influenced my work. What the fuck? Your personal beliefs were your work. Fucking liar. And that's how he ends the book, you know. He ends this is a book of him trying to justify himself. He says, I was never biased. He finishes that at the very end of the epilogue, right? At the very end of the epilogue. Meanwhile, the guy got fired because of his text messages. He says, my personal beliefs never influenced my work. What do you think influenced those text messages that you sent? That's your personal beliefs. You already said it. Oh, everybody used their phone for their personal communications. It wasn't a big deal. Everybody at the FBI did it. I'm allowed to have my own personal beliefs outside of my work. Well, your personal beliefs influenced your communications. Is that your communications? Oh, that's not part of my work. That's my separate personal stuff. I keep that totally separate. This guy is a fucking hypocrite. And the book is useless. I don't recommend it unless you really want to get a taste of what it's like to live in hell in some bullshit functionary government appointed position where everybody is lying. You can get fired at the drop of a hat. You're backstabbing. You're friggin' getting lied to, lying to people, involved in the gutter of human activity. Just repulsive. And that's the life of some people, and they got to live with it, and that's their whole worldview. I wish I had never read it, but it is what it is. At least it helped me to perhaps research some of these characters that are involved in the American political scene, and I don't really give a fuck. The sun's coming out. It's beautiful. Right up behind that tree. Hey, the sun is coming out. It was a cloudy morning. Perfect timing. Perfect timing to get rid of this and let the sun shine in. I'm going to wipe that out of my mind. Oh, I've gone on way too long. But God bless you. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a better day. than I had trying to read that gossip, that drama, infighting, crazy nonsense. What a wasted effort that was. The guy friggin' self-incriminates himself. He writes this book to try and explain his TDS, severe TDS at that. But it is what it is. That's where we're at today. God bless you. Thanks for watching. I hope you have a great day. I hope to talk to you again real soon, okay? Hopefully I'll read something more inspired in the next coming days and weeks. Take care of yourself. Talk to you soon. Spend time with people you love. Bye for now.